questions, you could feel free and put them into the chat box, and we're going to have plenty of time at the end of this talk for questions and answers. And also, if there's anything here on the slides, I'm going to try not to read slides so you can read them yourself, but you might want to, we're going to have the deck available for everyone so you could look at it at your leisure in the future. So let's get started. Here we go. This is just general information. You could read this later. So what are we going to talk about today? You are going to expand your vocabulary. I'm sure you've heard of many of these words like gut microbiome, dysbiosis, but now you're going to learn what that actually means. So we're going to first start with defining gut microbiome. We're going to learn what is dysbiosis, and then learn how to feed your gut to improve your mood, and not only mood, but also your general wellness. Helps with immune system, it helps with your cardiovascular system. Your gut controls so much. So what is the microbiome? We have 100 trillion microbial cells in our body, and they are primarily in our large intestine. We also do have them all over our body and also on top of our skin, but we find them everywhere. And because it's primarily in our gut, it's called our gut microbiota. And this is made up of genetic material. And we have both good and bad bacteria in our gut. Now, what's important is the balance between the good and the bad. And we're going to learn today how to eat healthily and our lifestyle, how that could improve the diversity of our gut microbiome. So as we know, diversity is a really important thing in our entire life. It also resides in our gut. So what does the microbiome do? It does so much. It is so important to all of our metabolic functions. As I mentioned, it really helps our immune system. It impacts our mood. It impacts our gastrointestinal system. It's linked with a lot of different issues like obesity, cardiovascular disease, cancer. So how we feed our gut will impact our health overall. And many of you might have heard of the gut-brain axis. So this is the connection between our gut and our brain. And you might have heard the term that our gut's our second brain. Well, that's because we have something called the enteric nervous system. And this is part of the parasympathetic system. And the enteric nervous system functions independently and part of your gut. And that is why it's called your second brain. So how do these microbes come into play? Well, the bacteria in your gut create and respond to neurotransmitters. And you might have heard of the neurotransmitters, dopamine, serotonin, and GABA. Now, these neurotransmitters send signals to our brain. Those signals are sent through what's called the vagus nerve. Now, these signals are very simple, but they do give us information, such as, am I hungry? Am I full? Do I feel good? Do I feel bad? Now, those neurotransmitters of dopamine, serotonin, and GABA, they provide us with good feelings, positive feelings. And when we feed our gut with beneficial bacteria, that's when we are going to secrete those wonderful neurotransmitters that make us feel good. So you may or may not have heard of something called a psychobiotic. So a psychobiotic is a type of probiotic. And the definition is a living organism when ingested in adequate amounts produces a health benefit in patients suffering from psychiatric conditions. So basically, these psychobiotics will improve our mood. And how do they do that? They transmit those, they help produce those neurotransmitters, the active substances that go through our gut-brain axis. So here's a book called The Psychobiotic Revolution. And it's really a great read. If you want to learn more about this topic, I highly recommend reading this book. It's very interesting and it will give you a lot of additional information beyond what I'm telling you today. So there are a couple of probiotics that are specifically psychobiotic, and those are in the families of Lactobacillus and Bifidobacterium. And there was a wonderful study that showed that Lactobacillus rhamnosus act very similar to Prozac by increasing GABA. Now, I'm not saying that you should take this probiotic and replace Prozac if you're currently taking that now. It just goes to show that probiotics do help with our neurotransmitters. And what's dysbiosis? Well, you could just tell from the word dys, it's something bad. So that is when we have an imbalance of our good bacteria versus our bad bacteria. Now, the most common bacteria in our gut are Firmicutes and Bacteroidetes. Now, Firmicutes are bad bacteria. Firmicutes are linked to obesity, autoimmune diseases, gastrointestinal issues, mood disorders. So when you have this imbalance between the good bacteria, which is the Bacteroidetes, so you have less Bacteroidetes and more Firmicutes, you're going to have increased risk of these issues. Now, how do we know this? Well, sometimes we have cravings. And if you're the type of person who craves sugar, you may have a dysbiosis. And the reason for that is that these bad bacteria, they love sugar. They go for it. And what happens is when the bad bacteria consumes sugar or metabolizes sugar, it releases dopamine, which makes you feel good. So that means you still have those too much bad bacteria, but you can change that. And we could change that by how we eat and our lifestyle. So as I mentioned, there are possible issues when we do have dysbiosis. You might feel tired, you might have diarrhea, maybe headaches, or maybe your immune system isn't working well, you're getting sick often. But it also contributes to some chronic diseases like colon and liver cancer, diabetes, celiac disease, arthritis, Parkinson's disease, Alzheimer's disease, cardiovascular disease, eating disorders, and depression and anxiety. So improving how we eat will improve these chronic diseases, not just for our gut, but overall health. So how do we improve our gut health and our microbiome? Well, there's a lot of ways we could do it. Of course, we're talking about nutrition today, but there's also reducing alcohol, increasing exercise, reducing stress, improving our weight, being healthier, age, or genetics, the mode of your delivery. So if you were delivered vaginally, you have naturally more good bacteria. And if you were breastfed, you have more good bacteria. If you had a lot of antibiotics throughout your life, you're probably gonna have more bad bacteria. Infections, inflammation, and chronic stress also impact bacteria in your gut. Now, there are a lot of these things that we can change, but there are many that we can't. We can't change our age, we can't change our genetics, we can't change our mode of delivery or how we were fed, but we can change how we eat. We could influence how much we drink, how much we move, try to improve our stress, sleep better. So there are things we can do to improve our gut health and our overall wellness. So how do we go about feeding our gut to improve it, to make us feel good and improve our mood? So number one, fiber. Fiber improves our gut bacteria. It increases that positive gut bacteria. So the more fiber you eat, the better you are to your gut. The opposite is true too. If you have a low fiber diet, you are going to reduce the amount of good bacteria in your gut. So eat more fiber. And we're going to talk about in a little while how to go about doing that. the other thing, the other part is fat. On the other side, fat also will reduce the good bacteria and increase the bad bacteria. So for example, we talked about the bacteroidetes. When someone consumes a high fat diet, they reduce those good bacteroidetes. And bacteroidetes have been implicated in weight loss, whereas high fat diets increase the bad bacteria, the firmicutes and the proteobacteria. And firmicutes are associated with obesity. So that's another reason why we want to stay from high fat diets. And a very interesting study was done on mice that showed mice that they ate a high fiber, antioxidant rich Mediterranean diet, and they switched them to a Western diet. And Western diets are high in fat and also high in protein. What happened in just one day, it negatively impacted their microbiome. So it just goes to show one day of poor eating, high fat, low fiber, is going to influence your gut. So how do we increase fiber? Well, we want to aim for at least 25 to 38 grams of fiber a day. And it's really not that difficult to do. The foods that are high in fiber are fruits, vegetables, whole grains, legumes, beans, nuts, and seeds. And just a little example here, let's say for a meal, I want to have a salad. And if I just add some tablespoon of chia seeds to it, I cut up an apple, throw the apple into my salad, I top it with some refried beans. Just there, I added 15 grams of fiber. That doesn't even account for the lettuce that I put into my salad or any other vegetables I add to it. So it's not difficult to increase fiber in your diet. The key is to make sure for every meal you consume, you have some kind of fiber in it, as well as your snacks. How else can we feed our microbiome? Well, I'm sure you all heard about probiotics. So probiotics are good bacteria that's either the same as or very similar to the bacteria that you already have in your body. And we can find probiotics in yogurts. So not every yogurt has bacteria, has probiotics in it. So you want to look at the label. You want to make sure it says L. acidophilus or S. thermophilus or L. bulgaricus. And you just check the ingredient list, make sure they are added. And that means there are probiotics in that yogurt. Some cheeses have it. You might find it in lactobacillus milk. You might find it in kefir. Fermented foods are amazing. They are really high in probiotics. That includes sauerkraut, miso, kimchi. There are probiotic drinks like kombucha. And of course, there's supplements. Now, I always recommend going for food before you go to supplements. I'll talk a little bit more about supplements later. But probiotics bacteria is really important for us to improve our gut bacteria, our gut microbiome. Now, here are just some strains of probiotics. This is just for the very many strains. So whenever you buy a probiotic, it's going to list what strains are on it. Each strain is going to do something different in your body. So just randomly picking a probiotic off the shelf doesn't mean it's going to address whatever you want to address. For example, you might want to buy a probiotic because you have constipation, or maybe you have diarrhea, or maybe you're doing it for mood, or maybe for weight loss. So each one of those issues I just described, a different probiotic is going to target each one of those issues. So you really need to know the specific strain that's necessary for that issue. And how do you know that? Well, the best way to know that is to talk to a registered dietitian like myself that is familiar with gut health and probiotics, or speak to a doctor who's also familiar with probiotics. That is really the best way. The other thing about supplements is supplements are not regulated. What's on the label may not actually be in that pill. So again, that is why I always recommend food over supplements. You might have heard of prebiotics. So prebiotics are also really important for our gut. These are the non-digestible parts of food, and that comes back to fiber. I mean, this is why consuming high fiber is very important for our gut. Now, what happens is that prebiotic fiber goes through the small intestine, it's not digested, and then it gets fermented when it reaches the large colon. And that fermentation process feeds the good bacteria in the gut. And now you have even more good bacteria in your gut. So there are a lot of high fiber foods that are rich in prebiotics. And you got a little list over here: bananas, onions, garlic, lentils, artichokes, sunchokes, endive, bananas, broccoli, fennel root, beets, asparagus, the skin of apples, chicory root, and beans. But these are not only the only foods high in prebiotics. And you don't even have to memorize this list. Just focus on having nuts, seeds, fruits, vegetables, whole grains, beans, legumes. And if you have that every day, you know you're getting the probiotics and the prebiotics that you need. So it's really important to just keep focusing on these healthy foods. And here's just a general list of prebiotic rich foods and probiotic rich foods. And as I mentioned, you can get this deck if you want. You can take a quick picture with your phone of these foods and keep it on your phone. So when you go to the supermarket, you have this as part of your shopping list. So when you go shopping, get yourself some beans, get some leafy greens, onions and garlic, mushrooms, all these delicious vegetables. Get some oats, have some oatmeal for breakfast. And then the probiotic rich foods, you could buy some yogurt, sauerkraut, tempeh, kefir, kombucha. There's so many wonderful, delicious options. Then you might have heard of digestive enzymes. Well, digestive enzymes are naturally made by our body, and they break down food so the nutrients can be absorbed. So for example, protease helps break down proteins, lipase breaks down fat, amylase breaks down carbohydrates, and lactase breaks down lactose. Now, we have digestive enzymes can also be found in certain foods like pineapple, kiwi, papaya, and ginger, and they help us digest our food. Now, some people have issues with these particular digestive enzymes in their body. They might not make enough, or they might possibly not make them at all. So those individuals may want to buy a supplement. Now, again, I don't recommend running out and buying digestive enzymes unless you talk to a professional about what would be right for you, because there are so many different types out there and so many different brands. So that's another key about using food as medicine. Now, what foods cause gut imbalance? Well, I mentioned a few things like high fat. So one of those is red meat. So red meat has no fiber, has no pre or probiotics, and it's high in fat. So high fat foods, fried foods, they all decrease the microbial diversity. So we're going to have less of the good bacteria and more of that bad bacteria. Highly processed foods don't have any fiber. And as I mentioned earlier, a diet low in fiber is going to starve out that good bacteria and increase the bad bacteria. And then foods with added sweeteners also decreases microbial diversity. So these are the foods you need to avoid to keep your gut healthy. Now, this is just the psychobiotic food pyramid, which I really love because it shows you what you should be eating daily, often, weekly, and rarely. So, lots of whole foods, fruits, vegetables, whole grains, nuts, seeds, herbs, and spices. Have that every single day. Enjoy some fish and seafood for the omega-3 fatty acids and also your dairy, yogurt, fermented products. And every now and then, have some poultry, eggs, dairy, but really avoid the processed foods, red meat, foods with added sugar. And these are ways that you can decrease the foods that decrease our gut biodiversity and increase foods that will increase the positive, the good bacteria. So instead of white refined carbohydrates, have whole grains like oats, rye, amaranth, buckwheat, farro, brown rice. Instead of fruit juice, which is high in sugar, have some whole fruit, berries, dried fruit. Instead of ice cream, enjoy some yogurt or kefir. Instead of meat, have some fish that's high in omega-3 fatty acids, or eat plant-based proteins like beans, legumes, tofu, tempeh, natto, which is fermented soybeans. So again, that's more fermentation. And here's just some gut-friendly snacks. So just adding more fiber, more vegetables and fruit, more probiotics and more prebiotics. So the takeaway is enjoy plenty of plant-based whole foods. So fruits, vegetables, beans, legumes, nuts, seeds, whole grains. Increase your prebiotics and probiotics in the form of foods. Avoid highly processed foods, foods with added sweeteners, high-fat foods. And I didn't get to talk about self-care. I wish I had more time, but reduce stress, sleep more, exercise more, move more. So I want to thank you. Okay, we have a little bit of time for questions. Let's see what we have here in our chat box. All right. Amazing book called Fiber Fueled. Cool, definitely. So what other kinds of meat not read? Well, what I'm talking about is leaning as much towards plant-based proteins. So if you want to have beans, legumes, or high in fiber, tempeh, tofu, they're all very healthy for you. The healthiest diet for my is whole food plant-based. Yes, but exactly. It eliminates animal products and is completely based on beans, legumes, vegetables, fruits, and seeds. Yes. So is Metamucil a good source of fiber, or does it have to be fiber from real food? Well, I always suggest fiber from real food because that gives you not only fiber, but also phytonutrients. So phytonutrients are nutrients from plants. So there are so many phytonutrients out there, and we can't quantify the number. There's just so many. So it's really important as much as possible to get your fiber from food. If for some reason your doctor suggests that you take Metamucil, that's fine. But if you can, get your fiber as much as possible from food. Oops, sorry. Oh, any other questions?
Rena, there was one other that I'm seeing here. How would poultry and pork compare with red meat? Would you say they're about equivalent, or are they a little better off?
So poultry without the skin is a little bit better than red meat. But then again, you got to compare, like, for example, if you're getting red meat that's grass-fed, hormone-free, and super lean, it could be equivalent to the pork or the white meat chicken breast without the skin. So a lot of it is like comparing how much saturated fat is in that meat. Great question. I see there's another question here. What about seitan? Absolutely. That's another great protein. Seitan's made from wheat gluten. Another plant-based protein. Now, if you have if you want more resources, at the end of this deck, I have, oops, there we go, come on. I have about 43, is it? 42 resources here that you could look through and learn more about the gut. And you certainly could send me an email. This is my email if you have any more questions. Any other questions? Feel free to chat. And like it was mentioned, focusing on plant-based whole foods is going to be what is going to diversify your gut, make you feel good. Not only is it important for your mood, but also for your gut health, your brain, your gastrointestinal system. How much cheese is healthy? Ah, great question. So you gotta look at the big picture. So when any type of food we eat, you gotta think about how much of that food it is, what our goals are, what you need to support yourself. So for some people, they're very healthy, they exercise a lot. They might be able to eat more cheese than a person who has high cholesterol. So it's going to be quite individualized. Any other questions? Okay. Okay, I enjoy eating beans and veggies, but what if you're one of those people that gets gas from them? Great question. So make sure, number one, when you start increasing your fiber, increase the amount of water that you consume, because that will help digest the fruits and vegetables or whatever the gas producing foods. If you find that doesn't help, you could even try something like Beano, which is like a digestive enzyme, which helps with the gas. So you could try having Beano or something very similar to Beano. Smaller quantities too. So sometimes you might find that you could eat beans, but only a certain amount. And once you get more than a certain amount, then it starts producing gas. So be mindful of the quantity. So maybe it's a half cup of beans is okay, but a full cup is not okay for you. So often it's the dose of the high fiber food. Any other questions?
Great. Well, I think we're all set for now, but if anyone has any questions, like Raina said, feel free to reach out. And yeah, thank you so much, Raina, for hopping on and going through all this with us today.
You're welcome. Thanks for coming, everybody. Nice to see everybody or here. Have a great day, everyone.
You too. Thanks so much.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.